Good morning. It is my great pleasure to host an international conference on migrant integration in East Asia. Due to the Corona-19 pandemic, we have to use video meeting as a channel of our communication to share our concerns and knowledge of migrant integration in East Asia. As we all know, East Asia is one of dynamic regions of the world in terms of mobility of people, commodity, and culture. As increasing numbers of people of migrant backgrounds become new members of society, each country in East Asia has become more diverse in racial, ethnic, and cultural composition of the population. Racial and cultural diversity can become assets for creativity and new engine for sustainable development, but they can breed new forms of prejudice, discrimination, and even conflict among peoples of different cultural backgrounds. Thus, successful migrant integration and peaceful coexistence between migrants and natives are important research topics as well as policy tasks for all countries in East Asia. Research on migrant integration has been actively conducted in recent years, and now we have a better understanding of the situations of migrants and government policies in East Asia. However, researchers in each country tend to work independently and do not have a chance to know about each other's research outcomes. At this point, it is very timely to meet and share our research findings and policy recommendations on this issue. This conference was possible thanks to the support of the Social Science Korea Project Group for Research on Distributive Justice, Diversity, and Social Cohesion, the Center for Distributive Justice at Seoul National University, and the Institute of Social Research at Korea University. I want to take this time to thank Professor Byung-gi Chu at Seoul National University and Professor Kyung-geun Kim at Korea University for their generous support for this conference. I wish we have constructive discussions in each session and build a foundation of research networks for our continuing collaboration. Again, I want to express my sincere gratitude for your participation in this very busy season of the year.
Labor market mobility, family reunion, education, health, political participation, and permanent residence, and access to nationality, and anti-discrimination are the 8 policy strengths. And we evaluate the questions that MIPEX asked to answer based on the official document provided the Korean government. So I cannot emphasize enough that this is the institutional environment facing foreigners who want to stay in Korea for more than 90 days, which is classified as long-term foreign resident. Okay, so enough of this measurement. I know that I believe that you all know my tags. So let me just show you the result that we provide before, MyFX4 and MyFX5. So when we provide the result in MyFX4, Korea is slightly above the average. You know that mostly the countries who participate in this project are European Unions. So the slightly above average, the result of slightly above average actually show us that Korea is doing well. You know, the Korean government actually try to understand how Korea is doing, especially when we compare to Japan, which the Korean government think that Korea should do well, at least than Japan. And Japan is can you find Japan here? Japan is not doing as well as Korea. So in the Korean government, the officials and Ministry of Justice in Korean government actually pleased with this result. And the 2019, which is MyPix5, and we can only get 4 countries here: Czech, Norway, and Japan, and Latvia, and all the information that the Korean government cares about how we are when we compare the result with Japan. And Korea, again, does better than Japan in overall score without hearth here. And when you think that the measurement is based on 3 scale, and 60 and 59 is better than halfway. So Korea is classified as more than halfway in terms of integration effort. So this is tentative result, but when we compare in 8 areas, 8 policy areas here, Korea is relatively well with other countries except Norway, which is traditionally classified as migration-friendly country. Other than Norway, Korea is doing well here, but we don't know the result by other European nations as of now. So this is only tentative result. And this is, again, MyPix4 Korea result, and this is MyPix5, the result. And as you see here, there's some decrease in areas because of revision that MyPix asked us even for the previous result. So labor market mobility, there's a decrease. Basically, even though we have the same legal structure in labor market mobility, they actually adjust the score in MyPix5. So we have this result here, and other areas actually are revised in the process here, even though we have very similar institutional and legal structure here. And this is the result. I mean, this is the slide that you don't have in the publication. And this is the email that I got after I gave you the slide in this conference. And MyPEX gave us this summary result without providing detailed information or final result. And let me just share the correspondence that I had a couple days back. MyPEX found that Korea is one of the countries that have a comprehensive approach to integration. So that means that we can wait for a good news, at least in terms of the legal and policy environment, that we are doing well. The Korea promised a comprehensive approach to integration, but only goes halfway to actually guarantee equal rights, opportunity, and security for immigrants. But again, Korea is above the average, but we are slightly below this such immigrant friendly countries in Northern Europe. And the final, evaluation that they sent me is that Korea's approach is similar to one of the top MyPEX countries, but its policies still involve many more obstacles and less targeted supports. So this is a mixed result, but I'm pleased to know that Korea is similar to one of the top MyPEX countries. Okay, let me just show you each area's performance in Korea, and there is a list of the sub-dimension that we are supposed to provide to MyPEX. Korea turns out particularly strong in access to public sector, access to self-employment, recognition of academic qualification, economic integration measures of youth and women. Average score of Korea in this policy is lower than that of MyPEX 4. Again, they readjust the scale even though there hasn't been no significant change in legal structure. And the second policy area, family union, there are 13 sub-indicators, and Korea's success around 55, and is also rated lower than the score of MyPEX 4. As you gain this information from the this octagonal graph that I showed you a minutes ago. And the third policy area, education, Korea is rated close to 70, the highest score out of all 8 policy areas for Korea. And the fourth, how many minutes do I have, Professor Lee? Okay, can I go on? Average indicator score for health is around 50, and there are 4 dimensions and 24 questions. Health is the policy area with the lowest average score among 8 policies for Korea. So the overall score for Korea slightly lower because of this, the policy area. And political participation, we are specifically strong here. Average indicator score for political participation is around 60. And Korea is evaluated to achieve the high standard and active information policy and policy funding support for national immigrant bodies. And one episode that I can share here is Korean government allow foreigners with who stay longer than 5 years and with permanent residency can actually vote in regional election. I don't think that other Asian countries give this right to vote to foreigners. So we are proud of the fact that we give you the voting rights to foreigners, even though it is restricted to a regional election. So we get the higher score in this particular participation policy area. And the 6th policy domain is permanent resident, and we received the 60s, and among 70 indicators, Korea turned out particularly strong in duration of validity permit and access to social security and assistance. And the 7th, access to nationality, Korea comes out strong only in residence condition for foreigner naturalization, but average indicator score for access to nationality is around below the halfway. So access to nationality is the second lowest after health domain. And the final policy domain, which is anti-discrimination, and our average score in this area is around halfway, which is 50. As I told you before, they went through, MIPEX went through some changes in this MIPEX 5. So even though we provided the information 5 years ago in MIPEX 4 and 7 years ago, I think, MIPEX 3, they revised the score of the previous result. So the final result we'll get in couple of days will actually give a revised score even for the previous effort. So they actually took great efforts to have consistency within a country and across other countries. So I'm looking forward to getting the final result. But again, the summary, the information about Korea gives me some hope that we are doing better in integration effort. Let me just conclude my presentation by sharing some observation gained in this research effort. I think we should re-examine theoretical, empirical, the consistency for each policy area. There are some the overlapping indicators across the policy areas. So they need to, maybe it has to do with the, I'm sorry, maybe that is why they actually developed core indicator in this MIPEX 5 because of this overlapping policy indicator concerns. And again, this is the fact that I emphasize a couple times. This does not do justice to the reality facing foreigners. So I think they need to develop the survey or observational studies that foreigners actually face in each host country.
Thank you so much, Professor Yoon. I'm sorry for the several interruptions because some of during the presentation, all participants, please be sure your mic is turned off because we can have several sound. Sorry for inconvenience. But your presentation is wonderful. Now we want to move to our second presentation. Professor Kondo. Professor Kondo is
yes,
here.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Our second presenter is Professor Kondo. He is in Faculty of Law at Mayo University, Nagoya. Now your turn.
Okay, thank you very much. My university is Meiji University, located in Nagoya. And I will also use to my, sorry. Okay, so now I would like to start my presentations. And my presentation is sketches the recent situation of Japan, and not only integration policy, but also immigration policy, admission policy. So, introduction first. In April last year, new status of residence specified skilled workers, number 1, SSW number 1, started to accept middle skill workers. This is the first time in Japan to accept middle skill workers in 14 specified industry fields. And second introduction, according to the new admission policies, maybe our foreign residents number will increase, but unfortunately, the impact of COVID-19, now the number is slightly decreasing. But anyway, Japanese government issued comprehensive measures for acceptance and living together of foreign nationals. I will call this comprehensive measures. And the government revised this year. And introduction third, after the comprehensive measures, the Ministry of International Affairs and Communications revised the last plan, the plan for the intercultural living together promotion in local communities. So I will explain briefly. I don't like to use multicultural coexistence policies. The government translated it in multicultural coexistence. But in my view, Japanese policies are different from Canadian multicultural policies, but some similarity with European cities' intercultural policies. That's why I would like to use intercultural living together policies. And fourth introduction, my PEX 2019 was also not good, but maybe it can be classified as half favorable. But the result was less than the average. I will explain later the result of my PEX. And introduction fifth, however, the national integration policies are not so good situation in Japan, but local integration policy, especially in Hamamatsu City, was favorable under the Intercultural City Index. I will explain briefly ICC index later. So now I would like to start the first point, SSW number 1 as middle skill labors. This new residence status for foreign workers who work in jobs that require considerable knowledge of or experience in specified industry fields. That's why middle skill labor. And the government estimates that up to 345,150 in 5 years in 14 industries. However, the result is quite small numbers. So for 14 industries, for example, care workers, food service industry, construction industry, building, cleaning management, agriculture, manufacture of food and beverage, accommodation industry, machine parts and tooling industries, shipbuilding and ship machinery industry, fishery, aquaculture, automobile repair and maintenance, industrial machinery industry, electronics and information industries, aviation industries. And the government prospect in 5 years is big numbers. But the result of the fiscal year 2019 was quite small number. And added 3 months as of 13th June this year, the number is not so big. So why the number is so small? Only 8% of the result.
8398이요? 예, 677. 8398은 677이요?
Please use the mute.
방문 목적이요. 오늘
Okay, I will
음소거 좀
continue.
해주세요. 이진민 씨 음소거 부탁드립니다.
그래서 잠깐 홍춘장 사무장한테 얘기하려고 왔어요. 네네네.
Okay, the prospect number of the first fiscal year last year was 47,515, but the result was only 8%. The first reason is lack of preparation, and the skill and language test was delayed. And the agreement with sending countries have also delayed. That's the first reason. And second reason, application process was complicated and the screening took time. And the most important was the impact of the COVID-19. And it was difficult to enter Japan for the prospective workers, even if they passed the test in foreign countries. So anyway, this residence status is a significant meaning. Japan is now opening the door to foreign workers in area of middle skill labor, which is in between simple labor. Simple labor is a special Japanese immigration term, nearly equal unskilled labors, but something different. But anyway, we can consider it as unskilled labor and specified and technical labor. So between unskilled labor and skilled labors, that's why middle skilled labors. This is a big policy change. Previously, we continue to keep proactive acceptance for professionals with special and technical skill, and cautious acceptance for simple or unskilled labor has been changed. And the government issued the comprehensive measures 1918 and slightly revised 19th, and this year is also issued the revised versions. There were 191 measures, and the government listened to opinions from both Japanese and non-citizens. And the first time they tried to survey of non-citizens will be conducted. Now I'm a member of these committees. And the result will be appear in the end of this year. And the maybe most significant point of these measures, government established one-stop comprehensive consultation centers, one-stop shop. Firstly in 100 locations, but it will be more. So it is merely placed as a single contact center for local governments to share information and consultation in multilingual services, more than 11 languages. Some centers use ITC, but many has many translators. But there is one problem. This center is not the place to solve their problems. Only consult or only give the information. Maybe so. I hope in near future the center will be more active to solve the problem. And also in future, it is hoped that the basic act for an intercultural society, I'm supporting this idea of the act. We don't have any act to indicate in intercultural policy or multicultural policy at the moment. So we need this kind of act. And according to this act, the clarification of aim of intercultural policies, basic support plan, annual report, promotion procedure, response to complaint, and research needed to be included. The big opportunity party, democratic parties, having an idea to make this act. But government at the moment, they don't have this idea. So I will explain the revised plan for the intercultural living together promotion in local communities in September this year. New plan added several new points to the last 2006 plan. Contribution to regional revitalization and globalization was included. Regional revitalization was the idea influenced by the ICC, Intercultural City. And awareness raising was stressed and eliminate unfair discriminatory speech, hate speech, was influenced by the 2006 Act. It was called Anti-Hate Speech Act. Unfortunately, there was problem of anti-hate speech, especially for Koreans or Chinese. And this plan included plain Japanese. Now there are so many foreign residents from many countries. So multilingual information is important, but it is difficult to give all languages. That's why plain Japanese is at the moment very significant, and many local governments are using plain Japanese and with some majority foreign languages. And also this plan was influenced by the COVID-19 and the SDGs. We are calling new daily life. And also this plan added to pay attention to diversity and inclusiveness of Japan. And also intercultural understanding education for recognizing cultures and developing mutual respect. And also the last plan asked to make an integration plan to prefectures and designated big cities only. But the new plan asked all local governments. At the moment, prefecture has such kind of intercultural plan, or almost 100%. Designate the cities also. But in Tokyo, 91% was, and the cities around the country, 71%. Towns, villages are 28% and 14%. So the government asked many, all local governments need to establish such kind of integration plan. So I will briefly explain my PECs. The last result, 2014, the total score is 46. And the among 38 countries, Japan was ranked to 27. This time, among 52 countries, and I don't know how many ranks, but anyway, less than the average. And almost same. Only political participation is changed from 20 to 30. But I will explain the rate. This is something misunderstanding. Anyway, I will explain again. Total result of Japan ranked the 27th among 38 countries in the last two versions. And the new version will be appeared. And by the end of this year, all result will be appeared. Japanese integration policy improved +1 point in this time. This is connected to the establishment of one-stop comprehensive consultation centers, as I mentioned before. These centers in over 100 locations across Japan provided foreign nationals with quick information and advice in many areas of life. This active information policy was counted as one element of political participation. Even now, Japanese local governments don't have voting rights all level of municipality level, prefecture level, of course, national level, but not changed. But only active information policy changed. That's why the result is something good. But maybe this information will be misleading. The active information policy is not so connected with political participation. But the information from my text, such kind of one-stop shop will be marked 50. That's why this will be increased. And anyway, I will explain other areas. Japan was unfavorable in the area of anti-discrimination and slightly unfavorable in the areas of education and political participation. And I think education and political participation are so different between South Korea and Japan. So no specific anti-discrimination act, but we have now Anti-Hate Speech Act. But this act is only principle level, no punishment. However, Kawasaki City, this city famous for many Korean concentrated cities. And Kawasaki City ordinance for respecting human rights is anti-discrimination act and also anti-hate speech act. This ordinance is the first time to punish hate speech. A fine of up to 500,000 yen will be imposed on those who repeat 3 times discriminatory speech or behavior against people from abroad or their offspring, mainly Koreans, on the basis of race, nationality, and sexual orientation. This is also important, not only nationality or race, but also sexual orientation is a new mode of anti-hate discrimination. And the labor market mobility is halfway favorable. However, foreign workers discussed here was excluded short-term residents, such as technical interns. So technical interns had a significant problem. And family reunion is slightly favorable. However, technical interns and the new status of SS #1 are not eligible for family reunion. This is also the problem of human rights. Permanent residence is also slightly favorable. However, 10 years residence for the permission requirement is longer than 5 years residence for naturalization. This is a strange point of Japan. Health is also slightly favorable. However, limited number of local governments can afford medical interpreter system in Japan. Access to nationality is halfway favorable. Now, 76% of countries maintain a tolerant approach toward dual citizenship. So, prohibiting dual citizenship, acquisition of nationality is quite rare in Japan. Only 0.5% of foreign population in Japan. So this is a chart restrictive for dual citizenship. Almost Asian countries and African countries. I will explain intercultural city index, commitment, education, neighborhood, and so on. So some points are over average, and education, public service Of course, anti-discrimination is less than the average. But anyway, Hamamatsu City positioned 20th among the 88 cities. That's why the local community level, local government level are slightly better than national level. Okay, so I will show the population shrinking, working age population shrinking, and the increase of total dependency ratio. So Japan is a serious problem, and also South Korea is serious. Italy and Germany are serious, Spain. So many countries are considering to accept immigrants. But Japanese government are still now rejecting to accept immigrants. But in future, we need to change the policies. And even now, the government changed the policies, as I mentioned before. We accept middle skill labor. This is connected to the working age population shrinking. So I will conclude. Conclusion 1, it is not enough just to expand the rotation scheme for short-term foreign workers, but to lead to their long-term settlement. So I don't explain the SSW number 2. In near future, SSW number 2 will start. In this residence, will stay longer, and they will be counted as real immigrants. In near future, it will be started. And in order to respond to aging population, a full-fledged immigration policy should be constructed to future citizens of Japan. Conclusion 2, current system which doesn't permit family unification for 5 years with SSW1 should be reconsidered. SSW2, they can bring family. And SSW2 will be counted as skilled labor. But the person firstly enter as technical interns, and they change the status to SSW1, and then they change the status SSW2. Such a complicated residence status are now considered. And second, Japanese language education system should be improved. Third, recruitment and examination system for SSW number 1 and number 2 should be expanded. Technical intern training program should be terminated. This is, it is called as human trafficking, a serious problem of human rights violations. Number 5, residence requirement for permanent residence permission for 10 years should be shortened to 5 years. 6, Citizenship Act should allow dual citizenship. 7, local voting rights should be granted to denizens, permanent residents. 8, right to medical interpreter should be protected. 9, Anti-Discrimination Act should be enacted. And also last, Basic Act for an Intercultural Society should be enacted. So thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Kondo. Our third or last presenter is Professor Pei Lan from Taiwan. She belongs to National Taiwan University, Now it's your turn, Casey.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Okay, so it's a great pleasure for me to joining the conference. I want to thank Professor Yoon for organizing this wonderful event. So let me share my PowerPoint with you. Okay, so our paper will shift the focus from policy to the meso level of organization. That is the brokerage industry. The title of the paper has been slightly modified. The new title is Bridge, Bypass, and Reroute, Brokering the Mobility of Vietnamese Workers to Taiwan. I have a co-author, Jin Yong-da, who is also online now. So, okay. So, the Vietnamese migrant worker has been the most important source of migrant workers in Taiwan's manufacturing sector. You can see from the figure that by 2020, among the total population of factory workers, Vietnamese occupies more than 40%. So the existing literature has documented the multi-layer brokerage networks between Vietnam and Taiwan. Because the Vietnamese government has placed restriction on the issuing of license. So only a small numbers of state-owned companies can run the brokerage agency. But in fact, the agencies in actual operation are a lot of small size unlicensed agencies. They would borrow licenses from these state-owned agencies, and they are actually in cooperation with the Taiwanese brokers. On the other hand, the Taiwanese government also has very strict regulations on the quota. That is, employers would be qualified to hire foreign workers. And as a result, because the quota in the past was very limited, so a lot of Taiwanese brokers are in competition to win the service, to win the contract from the Taiwanese employers. So as a result, Taiwanese brokers have to pay a kickback to Taiwanese employers. So it is a service provider who pay rather than the service user, that is Taiwanese employers who are paying for the service of brokerage. However, the situation has been changing somewhat since 2016. Partly because Taiwan has tightened state regulation and also opened the quota application for the employers. On the other hand, the market dynamics in Vietnam has also changed substantially. So let me explain more in the following. So first, the situation of labor supply from Vietnam has become different. Oh, I'm sorry. This one. So partly because right now Vietnamese workers have more option in destination. As we have heard in the previous presentation, Japan and also South Korea has become popular destination for Vietnamese workers. You can see the figure here. The number of Vietnamese workers going to Japan has been rising. By contrast, the numbers of going to Taiwan has decreased in recent years. Another reason that impacts the labor supply from Vietnam is because of domestic economic growth in Vietnam has created increasing job opportunities locally. At the same time, the higher education in Vietnam has expanded. So right now we actually witness a very big numbers of college graduates who are facing unemployment. They are looking for opportunity overseas as well, but because they are more educated, they have higher expectation about the wages and labor conditions of overseas work. So as a result, they do not necessarily prefer Taiwan, and Japan that offers higher wages will become a priority in their choices. How about the situation in Taiwan? The labor demands has been increasing. As you can see on the figure here, the blue line indicates the job order or the employment permit issues. You can see that it has been growing in recent years. At the same time, the orange line indicates the actual numbers of hired workers. So you can see there has been a gap in recent years. That means the demand is higher, but the supply cannot meet the demand. So the increasing labor demand from Taiwan results from major changes in state regulation in recent years. First, the maximum residence of migrant workers has been extended. So in the beginning, it was only 3 years. But right now, it has been extended to 12 years and even 14 years for migrant caregivers. Secondly, the regulation on employer quota has been loosened, especially for the 3K industries, that is the labor-intensive, low-skill industries. Right now, the maximum proportion of foreign workers they can hire among the total labor population can be as high as 35%. And also because the pressure imposed by NGOs and international organizations to protect migrant labor rights, right now the government has relaxed regulation on employer transfer. Especially in 2016, there has been a major law change. Migrant workers now no longer need to leave the country at the end of the 3-year contract. So they can renew or transfer to a new employers without leaving the country and paying again for the brokers. So in this paper, we want to use this empirical case to engage in the discussion of migration infrastructure. This is a groundbreaking concept developed by Xiang Biao and Juhan Lindquist. They use the concept to describe the systematically interlinked technology, institution, and actors that facilitate and condition mobilities. So the concept is composed of various kinds of migration infrastructure, including commercial, regulatory, that is state policy, and also technical infrastructures such as the internet, and also the humanitarian infrastructure, including NGOs, and also international organization, and finally social infrastructure that refers to interpersonal networks of migrants. So in this paper, we want to emphasize 2 things. First, we want to examine how the various migration infrastructure intertwine, cooperate, and also conflict with each other. Secondly, the migration literature of migration infrastructure has talked about the consequences of involation. That means the infrastructure tend to become self-reinforcing and self-serving. But our paper also want to talk about how the infrastructure has capacity of flexible restructuring, especially the commercial infrastructure. They restructure and shift very quickly in response to market dynamic and also state regulation. So the research questions we ask are, first, how does the commercial infrastructure that recruit migrant workers from Vietnam to Taiwan restructure in response to changing state regulation and market dynamics in recent years? Second, what kind of labor do brokers and sponsors engage in during their interaction with employers and migrant workers to build networks, ensure profits, and bypass state regulation? Third, how do Vietnamese workers continue to pay high agency fee, regardless Taiwan's policy intervention and the reassembling of recruitment networks? Why are the various migration infrastructure making mobilities even more difficult? Our research methods rely on interviews conducted in both Vietnam and Taiwan, mainly with sponsors, migrant workers, and also staff members of the brokerage companies. Okay, so let me start by talking about the sponsor in Vietnam. So in the past, the brokerage companies in Vietnam rely on local sponsors to help them to reach potential migrant workers. So local sponsors are usually village heads or local leaders who are familiar with local bureaucracy for processing travel documents. So here we see the interweaving of commercial infrastructure and social infrastructure. These local sponsors provide face-to-face visits to the migrants' workers' family. They use oral communication, sometimes they bring gifts, and they also accompany migrant workers physically from the countryside to the city, bring them to the agencies in Hanoi. So the relationship is based on social trust embedded in local networks and also some kind of moral economy. So I use the term bridge labor to describe an important aspect of the brokerage labor, through which agency helped to bridge information and also emotional gaps for potential migrant workers. In the case of local sponsor, they helped to bridge the urban-rural information divide and the provide emotional labor to build trust between sponsor and broker with the migrant's family. But the situation has become a bit different now. So for the current brokerage networks, as you can see in the figures here, in addition to local sponsor, right now we have what we call cyber sponsor. So these people are either return migrants or even migrants who still reside overseas, who are familiar with internet and social media. So here we see
my name is In-Jin. I'm a PhD candidate in sociology at Korean.
The interweaving between commercial infrastructure and technical infrastructure. So this cyber sponsor, they post job order. These are information they get from the Vietnamese agency, and Vietnamese agency translate this job order from the Taiwanese agency. So the job orders contain detailed information about the potential job, which will include what kind of requirements the Taiwanese employers have, and also about the labor condition, including wages, the location of the company, and most importantly, overtime working hours. So the younger generation of higher educated Vietnamese migrants right now has more specific requirement and preferences for the kind of job they want. For example, they want a job with higher pay, they want to live somewhere near the city, and most importantly, they want jobs that promise higher number of overtime hours. So through the internet, they can get more detailed information and they can choose the kind of job they want. So for the cyber sponsor, based on their previous working experience in Taiwan, they helped to bridge the Vietnam-Taiwan information device. They also offer personal testimony to the potential migrant. They say, well, because I worked in Taiwan before, I know the situation, so I can help you to tell which job is better. And also I can offer my own experience to help you understand the journey ahead. So here I give you a quote from a cyber sponsor. I think he said, I give them a dream of success, a dream of making money. I can explain to them how long it will take to earn the money back for the agency fee, about a year also. If you work harder, half a year is also possible. If there's no overtime, I told them it's also good. You could work part-time in a restaurant or selling stuff online. Even if your work is not so good and you make a lot of money, you can still see Taiwan, gain the travel experience. They choose the job themselves, not me. If they feel that the job is no good, I can help them find something else. If they are worried, I will tell them that they can take a leave of absence and return to Vietnam after 1 year of work. The tickets are not cheap, very cheap now, so it's a journey. So here we see the bridge labor of cyber sponsor is similar to what Yasmin Ortigas has talked about as aspiration work. The sponsor or broker is trying to building aspiration among the potential migrant workers. Okay, so right now we have heard that the labor supply from Vietnam to Taiwan is actually decreasing. And also at the same time, the Vietnamese worker, especially the college-educated one, right now have more access to recruitment information online. Then the question is, why are the placement fees still so high? So as you can see the table here, $4,000 is a standard fare the Vietnamese government allow brokers to collect. But the actual charges to Vietnamese worker going to Taiwan range between 4,000 something to $7,000. So the big range here is depends on the overtime hours. So when the job order has more overtime hours, that means the workers can make more money in Taiwan. They will have to pay a much higher amount of placement fee. So here we see the overtime hours has become some kind of fictitious commodity that can be converted into value in the placement fee. So Taiwan's market, even though I have said earlier, compared to Japan or even South Korea, is not so attractive now, but still it has its own attraction because the waiting time is much shorter. For going to Japan or South Korea, it will usually take about a year or at least half a year because they have to learn the language and pass the skill test and so on. But for Taiwan, because the requirement for both language and skill level is very limited. So it can take as short as 1 month or even 2 weeks for going to Taiwan. So for the Vietnamese agency, to meet the fast order of Taiwanese brokers, they have to keep a lot of migrant workers in the training center or in the agency's dormitory. So in keeping the worker costs them money. So in order to keep the flows, they also prefer to send the workers going to Taiwan. So they will tell the workers, well, it will take a long time for going to Japan. Maybe you can go to Taiwan first to earn some experience. Okay, so that's why they are still willing to allow the Taiwanese agency to collect a major share of the placement fee. However, they are facing a new challenge now because I mentioned earlier, right now, a migrant worker can transfer employer domestically without going back to Vietnam. So they have to develop new business model to deal with the situation. So let me move on to talk about the brokerage industry in Taiwan. So the industry as a whole has become much more differentiated by sector. So right now we have a few very big brokerage company. They are serving the IT industry. The IT industries in Taiwan has been pressured by international buyers toward the no agency fee policy. So the situation is very different. But today we are only talk about the 3K industry. They are served by 60% of the brokers. These are very small and medium-sized companies. And as you can see in the figure here, the blue bar indicates the number of licenses that issues to the brokerage company by the government. But the red bars indicates the number of brokers, companies who are actually in operation. So you will see there's a big inconsistency. So why is that? Because many brokers has been doing what we call flexible ownership. They are holding multiple licenses in case they fail the orders from the governments, and then they have to terminate the licenses. One of the companies we interviewed even held as many as 7 licenses at the same time. So if in the events of legal violation, the company can selectively terminate one of the business before the government impose a sanction. So in the paper, I coined the term bypass labor to describe how brokers engage in flexible or unlawful practices to help employers or themselves circumvent state policies and the legal regulation. So there are a few different kinds of unlawful practices. One is black quota. That means because for employers to get quota from the governments, the proportion, the number of the quota of foreign worker is in proportion of the number of total the total number of local workers. So in order to create more quotas for foreign workers, the agency will help the employers to get ghost local workers in the scheme of labor insurance. So they will recruit their own relatives or their friends, you know, so it looks like they have a lot of local workers, but these are just ghost local workers. And also they help their clients to have what we call black quota. That means the A factory can borrow the quota from the B factory temporary and pay a fee to the factory B. And also they help their client to get a quota for hiring foreign workers through fake factory registration. Because many of these company factories are actually located in areas such as areas in proximity to farm labor, and they wouldn't able to get legal registration. And then the broker will borrow an address from a ghost office, or you know, in somewhere that can meet legal regulation of Taiwanese government. Okay, I'm running out of time, so let me move on to talk about the final things. That is what I call rerouting recruitment networks in Taiwan. So I was telling you that in 2016, with the new legal amendment, right now the migrant worker no longer has to leave the country at the end of 3-year contract to renew or transfer employers. That means a Taiwanese worker can no longer collect agency fee. So what they do now is they are rerouting the recruitment networks domestically in Taiwan. So you see, they are reproducing the sponsor network in Taiwan with the cyber sponsor, who are usually the migrant workers themselves, or the marriage migrants from Vietnam, or the translator in the brokerage company. They will post information online on Facebook and to recruit migrant workers who wanted to transfer to a new employers. So this domestic sponsor are collecting job buying fee from the migrant workers. The amount range between $150 US to $1,000 US. And then the Taiwanese broker can collect a major share later. So the rerouting of recruitment networks within Taiwan helps Taiwanese agents to outsource the unlawful practice of collecting fees through the domestic sponsor. And when the NGOs or the governments monitor the process, they can just say, well, it's the sponsor who are doing it, not me. Okay, so let me move on to conclude the paper. So this article examining the commercial infrastructure and the brokerage labor that facilitate but also constrain the mobility of Vietnamese migrant workers to Taiwan. Our research supports the argument that migration infrastructure tends to become self-reinforcing and self-serving, but our study also demonstrates the flexible capacity of commercial infrastructure. Although regulatory and humanitarian infrastructure have strengthened evaluation and audit on the brokerage industry, broker quickly developed innovative strategy to bypass state regulation and reroute the recruitment networks. So infrastructure and the flexible restructuring may sound like oxymoron, but we see through the mobility, through the combination, such combination, mobility appears to be the free choice and autonomous decision of migrant workers, but they have little choice but to rely on the intermediary in a given framework of infrastructure. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pei. Every presenter keep their time very punctually. Thank you so much again. Now we have one discussant, Professor Lee Hyun-ok, Yonsei University. Where is Hyun-ok? Oh, Hyun-ok there. Okay. Now it's your turn. Please have less than 30 minutes. So if I raise my hand, less than 5 minutes, okay? Okay. It's your turn.
All right, thank you very much for the excellent presentations. Yeah, I won't spend 30 minutes for discussion. The three presentations in this morning really made us think about the cross-national comparison and its difficulties. MyPax is an interesting attempt to compare the institutional conditions of migration, and I believe that it is a good start. But then, you know, as we move on to the second and the third presentation, we start to think that, okay, the reality is a living creature, and how can we actually capture the reality and compare? So really this session forces us to think about what it means by comparison, doing comparison in migration system. So I don't have like big things to discuss, but I just like to share the difficulties of comparison, the general impression. So for the MyPax, I believe that it is a good start, but as Professor Yoon mentioned initially, it only captures the policies, and it doesn't capture the reality. So of course, you know, the beauty of number, we know, the beauty of number lies in its simplicity. However, you know, how can we capture the complexity? So really the big question for us is, what are the opportunities of this MyPax and the risks, if there are any? So if you can elaborate a little more about this, I would like to ask this question. For example, Professor Yoon, say the case of access to the nationality, for example, we can measure in Korea, if one married to Korean nationals and stay in Korea after two years, they can apply for citizenship. Okay, we can measure this. But there is an exception. For example, if marriage is dissolved within 2 years, but still marriage migrant can apply for citizenship in case they have a child or expect to have a child with a Korean national. So in this case, does MyPax count this kind of exceptions? Is there any way to evaluate this kind of exceptions? So that's my question for Professor Yoon. And also, it made me think about the World Value Survey, you know, what MyPax can capture but cannot capture. It reminds me of the World Value Survey. In the World Value Survey, Korea and Japan kind of compete each other for which country is the most xenophobic country. So in Professor Yoon's presentation, Korea is doing pretty well in terms of MyPax, yes, system-wise, but then in reality, Korea can be, you know, counted one of the most xenophobic countries. So already it kind of poses a big question, research question. So that's, yeah. And for the second presentation, Professor Kondo, I have an impression that Japan really moves towards opening up the border and open its border to the foreigners. And yet, both at the national level and the local level, and yet there seems to be a little difference between the national level and local level. It seems to be, the local government seems to be a little more active in implementing pro-immigration policy right now. I would like to hear more about the context of overall movement towards opening up the border in Japan, because in terms of migration policy and also discourse, Japan has been very conservative so far. And what are the contexts of these recent years change? And also, is there any conflicts between the local government and the national government? It's not surprising that the local government feels that the pressure that we need to invite more immigration when you face the decline of the population, and really, how this issue is linked to, how this issue of migration is linked to the local revitalization movement. Is quite interesting. Could you please explain a little more about the context? Finally, the third presentation, Professor Feichalan, I was very excited when I actually look up your PowerPoint presentation and did some of the research. In Korea, indeed, Vietnamese are has been the biggest migrant workers group after the Korean Chinese. But then the recent years, actually the number has decreased. So then you show the figure that obviously there is a competition over the Vietnamese migrant workers among the destination countries. So it reminds me of, again, the method of comparison. So you only discuss about Vietnamese labor migrants in Taiwan, but in an interesting way, it really sheds light on the regional context, what's going on in Japan and what's going on in Korea. And also, not only in terms of, as you highlighted, with the concept of migration infrastructure, not only in terms of the regulation, but in terms of the labor market in destination. So I was thinking that it would be extremely interesting to think about this issue as a bundle of destinations, regulatory system, and also labor market situation, and also infrastructure, brokerage industry, how the competition actually happens among those. And it was also very interesting when you mentioned about the Vietnamese brokers and how they kind of build alliance and then work. Extremely flexible, but obviously extremely efficient and innovative. So I have a question in the case of Vietnamese brokers, for example, if they are aware of where they can send, like what happened in the marriage migration, for example, when the Taiwanese government kind of set the restriction on marriage migration, the brokers in Vietnam got in touch with Korean brokers, and then all of a sudden Korea got the influx of marriage migrants. So I found it extremely interesting how the Vietnamese brokers kind of deal with different kinds of opportunity, not only in terms of different destinations, but also like not only labor, they may deal with marriage. So did you see any kind of situation like this? So that's my question for now. And I have many other detailed questions on my list, but I will leave the floor for the speakers first, and then if there are any kind of follow-up questions, I will raise more points. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Hyunok Lee. You offer excellent discussions. Thank you so much. Since she saved a lot of time, we had enough time for floor discussion. So how about this way? Professor Hyunok Lee asked several questions to each presenters. So let's answer to the question first. Then we will open the floor discussion. So let's move to Professor Yoon Kwang-il, Sungmyeong Women's University, because Professor Hyunok Lee raised a question about MyPEX in Korea. So let's move that way. Where are Professor Kwang-il Yoon?
All right, thank you for the question. And okay, let me just share another slide. Actually, this the Excel spreadsheet that I sent to MyPEX, so that I can answer the first question you raised about the marriage migrant in a citizenship issue. So let me just show you. Okay, this is very fine print, but I think that you can all see the actual question that I was supposed to answer in the domain of citizenship requirement. So basically, the short answer to your question is no. There is no specific question that can incorporate that kind of tricky situation that marriage migrant face. As you see here, the detailed question is the residence condition, birthright citizenship second generation, and naturalization requirement, and naturalization language level, and naturalization immigration form, economic resources, and criminal records, and dual citizenship, and so forth. But as far as I know, they have not included that kind of this tricky situation in core question in MyPEX 5. So I think that they have to come up with a indicator that they can include that kind of tricky situation in this citizenship requirement, especially for accommodating Asian countries like Korea and Japan and other countries that host a lot of marriage migrants. But there's no specific indicator as far as I know to deal with that situation. And the second comment that I really like a lot is about we can have some worldwide survey data available even now to diagnose or prognosis actual citizens perception about this integration environment, changing integration environment, right? We were sort of in a situation. I mean, we as Korean always think about how we are doing as at least in comparison with Japan because of this historical experience that we had. But the thing is, there is only one or two questions that can actually measure the domestic perception of foreigners, especially in terms of prejudice or hatred, not about general perception about this integration environment in Korea. So my observation is still valid. I believe we need to have some sort of a survey to comprehensively diagnose the domestic perception of this changing migration environment. Okay, let me just pause for a moment and give this opportunity to another presenter, Professor Konder, to for his answer.
Thank you. We can move to Professor Kondo.
Okay, thank you very much for your good questions. So first of all, I will explain the situation of Japan. Historically, Korean was a major foreign residents and located in Osaka and Kawasaki at concentrated places. But Koreans can manage Japanese language well. So since 1990, our government started to accept Japanese origin foreigners can come to work. That's why many Brazilians came to Hamamatsu or Toyota or surrounding Nagoya city. Nagoya is a big city, and our neighbor city is Toyota. And Hamamatsu has a Honda or Suzuki. That's many automobile manufacturing places. So many foreign workers, mainly Brazilian, came to work. And such kind of concentration places, local governments, have serious problems. But even now, the ratio of the foreign residents in total Japan is about 2.2% or 2.3%. Not so many. But Toyota or Hamamatsu is 3 or 4 or 5%. And if there is in small cities, over 10 or nearly 10%. So we call such kind of concentrated places, mainly located in Tokai areas close to Nagoya city. So in these places, many local governments gathered and have a meeting, special meeting for foreign residents concentrated cities, appeal to the national government to make integration policies. And that's why Hamamatsu was maybe top runner to invent many local integration policies, Toyota also. And also, but maybe Japanese government did not concerned about to change the total national government because many local government doesn't have many foreign residents even now. But concentrated places is totally different. That's why many local governments are quite active to pro foreign residents policies. But the national government is disadvantaged about this point. And now they slightly changed the policy. That's the situation of Japan. And also, I will explain something about revitalized communities policies. For example, we don't have a good ethnic business. So local governments are supporting to invent such kind of ethnic business. And from COVID-19, we have many foreign tourists, quite so many number of the foreign tourists are coming to Japan. So many translators are necessary. And in this business are very good point to change the policies. For example, the second generation foreign roots persons, now they need to learn Japanese and they don't maintain their mother tongues. But some local governments are considering we need to bilingual policies or such kind of foreign children need to maintain mother tongue and Japanese. That's a good for them, and not only for them, but also for local government to have a business. So slightly changes such a policy, but very limited to the concentrated places, not for total local governments. That's my answer.
Thank you so much, Professor Kondo. Now it's turn for Pei Lan. Yep.
Thanks very much for Professor Lee's comment and question. Yeah, I think it will be very fruitful to compare across different receiving and sending country. I think that's why we need a conference like this. I'm looking forward to working together with presenter. We are going to hear about the situation of Vietnamese workers in Japan in the afternoon. I think before, when we think about comparative migration research, we usually just compare migration regime across different receiving countries. But I think right now maybe it's time for us to reconsider the unit of comparison. So maybe we should compare, different transnational infrastructure. And maybe we should examine more about not just a connection and also the competition relations between different sending country and also between different receiving country. I think that there are all kinds of interesting comparative study we can continue. As to the questions to compare how broker practice regarding marriage migration and labor migration, I think in the case of marriage migration, we will see it's more common for the brokers to dispatch. It's probably kind of weird to say dispatch, to send marriage migrants to different receiving countries. But in the case of labor migration, I think the Vietnamese brokers tend to be more, they have separate business niches. Because as I said earlier, to send workers to Japan has much higher language and skill requirements. So they usually have to be a bigger company and they have more experience of working together with the language training center. For the agencies working for the Taiwan's market, they tend to be small agencies and they don't really have such capacity to work together with multiple destination countries. So I think it's not as easy for them to shift the destination easily. So that's why they still have very limited bargaining powers vis-a-vis Taiwanese agency. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we can have a floor discussion. So if anyone has any questions or comments, just start the discussion time. So before that, please let us know your name and affiliation and whom your question or comments goes to. It's floor time. Is there any comments or questions? Professor Yoon, your mic is off.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question to Professor Kwang-il Yoon. Is Taiwan included in the 2019 MIPEX survey?
All right. Okay. I have no idea because they didn't give me the whole result as of today. But they told me that there are some additional Asian countries. I presume that will include Taiwan, but I don't know whether they actually include Taiwan. They will publish the result of all the countries by December, so we will know by then. Okay.
I also, I'm presider, but if you allow me to ask a question, I want to ask one question for each presenters. My first question goes to Professor Yoon Kwang-il regarding the MyPEX. Professor Yoon already mentioned that the MyPEX score is captured only for policy, but not reality. But my question is, in South Korea, we have a certain policy, but it goes to certain group, not all migrant groups. So in that case, for example, dual nationality and many good policy for concentrating only marriage migrants, but not like workers. So how you evaluate that kind of a situation? That was a question to Professor Yoon. My next question goes to Professor Kondo regarding Japanese situation. In your conclusion, you said you want to delete your first immigration policy, the technical intern program, but I wonder why Japanese government, if my memory is correct, since 2009, your government, the labor law applied to technical intern, right? So for me, even though you keep want to using technical intern, they are, in reality, they are laborers in terms of labor law. So why your government wants to hold that technical intern program? And besides that, last year you have specified skilled, so some sort of middle skilled immigration policy. The proportion is very small. Your government more depend on technical intern program because the number is more than, that increased very sharply. So please explain that. And my last question goes to Pei-che Lan. I'm very interesting because you mentioned the Vietnamese workers. These days, they became cyber broker. Why? Educated Vietnamese worker cannot bypass the local brokers. Among many immigrant groups in Taiwan, the Vietnamese pay a lot brokerage agency fee because there are many layers, right? But if educated Vietnamese workers can bypass some broker, so don't go through the Vietnamese broker, they can go through the Taiwanese broker, or they can bypass Taiwanese broker. Is there any way to skip or bypass the many layers? That was my last question. Thank you.
I have a question. Can I ask? Yeah, I have a question for Professor Lampeja. Okay, I find your conceptual framework very interesting, especially you define in the whole migration process into different infrastructure. But I think one thing that is absent in your framework is civil society. Civil society. According to my research about Vietnamese and Chinese technical trainees to Japan, one thing that I find it very curious about the process is no matter in the sending country or in the receiving country, it seems the civil society actors are missing. So that's why the whole puzzle about, for example, bypassing all the regulation, violating the local labor law or anything, cannot have some kind of what we call the voice for these kind of migrants. Okay. So I wonder if it can be something that you can tell me more about how this missing puzzle can be fit into your framework.
Thank you. If there are more questions or comments, please add.
I have a question. I'm Nan Lee from University of Chicago. I just have a quick, simple question for Professor Lan. You kind of mentioned a lot about how, you know, there are a lot of college-educated Vietnamese workers who are trying to migrate because they're expecting unemployment within their country. So I was just trying to make a sense of the time frame here. Were there more less educated Vietnamese migrant workers trying to go to other countries before compared to the present situation? And then if so, how is their situation different from the less educated workers? I guess my question kind of builds on the presider's question. Thank you.
I have a question as well. This one is for Professor Kondo. So I was just wondering, you mentioned the small number of people who are entering under the semi-skilled worker visa scheme, partly attributed to the coronavirus, which is no question there. But also in 2012, the government implemented a highly skilled worker visa and also had very few people who entered under that category. And I was wondering if maybe one of the problems is that for some reason, Japan is just maybe not so attractive to these types of foreign workers. So if you could perhaps elaborate on that, that would be great. Thank you.
More questions or comments?
I
If
just
not,
have one comment.
Yes.
Yeah, this just general. I'm not a specialist in this issue, but in general, in this global capital system, the capital can flow freely, and the commodities, but only the workforces were restrictions in each and every nation and even each and every local areas. So I think it's very natural. Each and every precinct, the labels were unevenly distributed. So the national level policy and the municipal and city level is different. I think I can understand that. But my question goes to Professor Kondo. Major university located in Nagoya, right?
Yes.
And also the David Green, Nagoya University too. I think in each and every places, they had their own historical context. But I think in general, in Korea, the Korean people are not that xenophobic. But I saw some survey research data. When some foreigners compete in your own job market, the attitude toward foreign workers is different. They are very hostile. So I think there are some segmentation of the attitude of the Japanese people or Korean people toward foreigners. My question is, you're already dealing with the newly, coming immigrants, but there are some Chinese. I want to ask you, can you tell some differences, the Japanese Nagoya residents or the local people, the attitude toward foreigners in general and Chinese in particular? Chinese, I mean, not just the Korean descendants, but the newcomers from Korea. Thank you.
Is there any questions or comments? If not, let's go to the presenters. The first answer by Professor Yoon Kwang-il, please.
Right. Thank you for the question, Professor Lee. Because MIPEC's questions are designed in a way to compare different countries and weighed heavily toward EU nations. They are limited because they cannot effectively deal with niceties of policy environment, institutional environment in Asian countries that include Korea. So I can give your comment, relay your comments to MIPECs, and I think they are in a process of coming up with other measures that can accommodate concerns that you have raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, Professor Kondo, please.
Yes, I have three replies. So regarding first questions, so why the government doesn't abolish technical intern systems? So Japanese companies are most are small-sized, agriculture or something also. So they need. That's why the government still continue. So the government's ideas is the international contributions, but reality is the cheap foreign labors. That's why, according to the ideas, they learn. They are educated to know the new technologies, and they return to their home countries and contribute to their development. That's the idea. That's why the technical interns cannot change the occupation places. They need to learn more about the same places. But according to the limitation of the selection of the occupation places, if the owner is not good persons, or if the salary are not good, but they need to keep the same occupations. That's why we need to abolish it. And our new schemes of the SSW1, they can change the occupation places. So if we use these schemes more, maybe technical intern systems are not necessary. And also we have the training systems. Training system is real trainees at moment. That's why we can abolish it. But the government or small-sized companies want to keep this technical intern systems. That's the answer of the first questions. And the second questions, so for, I forgot the second question. Could you explain again the second questions?
Nine? No.
Okay, I understand. So, of course, Japanese government don't give the information to foreign countries. We started the point system. Point system is originated from Canada or Australia, and maybe this is a big change of our policies. But the realities, quite small number of foreign candidates to apply this. And also SSW1 is also not so many at the moment. But this is one reason is lack of the information. And also the negative informations are very plenty. Of course, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said, start to these schemes. He explained in the parliament, we don't accept immigrants. We are not immigrants countries. This information is quite strong to foreign countries. That's why, anyway, we need to inform more, we change the policies. If we need many good talented persons from abroad, our government need to inform more, maybe. And of course, we need to change the act. We need to have an anti-discrimination act and so on. And we need to change the education system. That's the reply to the second questions. And the third questions, so attitude is, it is not so, there is no so good surveys, but I think now the ratio of the foreign residents, immigrants, are not so many. So general attitude of Japanese are not anti-foreign residents. But especially to Koreans and to Chinese, maybe they are something connected to the former colonial memories. And also presently, the governmental foreign policies are not so good conditions between Korean government and the Japanese government. This is influenced to the attitude of Japanese. But anyway, Japanese are not so strongly anti-immigrant movement. Of course, there is a small part of people are quite strong to speak the hate speech, but this is very exceptional. Most Japanese are considering we need workers. Many companies are needing more workers, more foreign workers. That's why we are not anti-immigrants movement at the moment. That's the answer of my last questions.
Thank you, Professor Kondo. Now it's your turn for Peitei. Professor Lan.
Yes, I have 3 questions. First, Professor Hae-Gyung Lee asked, why can't the higher educated Vietnamese worker bypass the many layers of recruitment networks? I think, in fact, the existence of multiple layers of recruitment is to the benefit of brokers and agencies. For example, the Vietnamese agencies, through the cyber sponsor and also local sponsor, they can reach more potential migrants, especially in a time of increasing recruitment challenges. And also, very importantly, such networks also help them to externalize the risk once they receive complaints from the migrant workers. They will say, well, it's the sponsor who referred you the job, not me. So I think that's one reason, why the infrastructure remain to be structured this way. And also, I think it has a lot to do with state regulation. I think either in Vietnam or Taiwan, the documentation cost is still quite high. Unlike South Korea, the EBS programs rely on direct hiring. In Taiwan, direct hiring is still very rare. I think most employers prefer to go through the brokers. So the whole system is not favorable for the migrant workers to use direct hiring. The second question, Carsten asked about the civil society. That is humanitarian infrastructure in our paper. We didn't really focus on the civil society as our focus, but it is certainly a very important background in what we discuss in the paper. For one, state regulation, especially the 2016 legal amendment we talk about, to allow migrant workers to transfer employer more easily, this did not happen in a top-down manner. It is definitely a bottom-up campaign which the migrant NGO has fought for a long time to achieve this legal change. And in addition to local NGO, international organization, especially the US anti-trafficking report, definitely impose critical pressure upon Taiwan's government. And also the business strategy I talk about, the rerouting network, in particular, the way the brokers pursue this way is also because they wanted to avoid the pressure imposed from NGOs. They wanted to outsource the risk, the responsibility to sponsor. So they say, it's the sponsor who are collecting the fee, not us. We are not doing the dirty stuff. So you are absolutely right. The civil society is a very important agent in the whole process of restructuring migration infrastructure. And the final question asked about whether the college-educated migrant workers and the less educated migrant workers, do they have different patterns of job seeking? The answer is yes. I should have mentioned that the local sponsor remain to exist as a parallel mechanism of recruitment. So they will tend to reach older, less educated, less tech-savvy migrant workers, probably residing in the countryside. And also there is a hierarchy of jobs as well. Like I mentioned, right now, the jobs in the IT industry, migrant workers do not have to pay placement fee. And of course, the college-educated worker will prefer that, and they also have more likelihood to be chosen. And for the less educated worker, it's more likely for them to go to the 3K industries, and those jobs tend to have less working condition. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to wrap up the first session. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation and excellent discussion, and also thank you for all for positive participation. Now, Professor Yoon, In-Jin might have some announcement for all participants. Now I give you mic to you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Chair, Professor Hae-Kyung Lee. You always help me for this important event. First of all, I apologize for the confusion and difficulty of linking in the beginning of our Zoom meeting. Because of that, I couldn't greet enough the participants from abroad. This conference is being recorded, and it will be shared after the editing process. And also the final and most updated version of the proceeding will be sent to you after the conference. And as I announced earlier, selected papers of this conference will be published in a special issue of the Journal of Asian Sociology. This is a Scopus journal published by a research institute in the Seoul National University. So please write or revise the manuscript within 3 months and send me your manuscript. Then we will put together and submit them to the editor of the Journal of Asian Sociology. I think that's the way we, make a constructive outcome out of this conference. So we'll take lunch time until 1 o'clock, and we'll meet again for the afternoon sessions. Thank you very much for your participation. Okay.
Have a good lunch.
Okay.